There is one word that kind of brings all of these readings together. And the word is relationship. We are being invited into a relationship. No ordinary relationship, but an eternal relationship. And I remember some time ago having a discussion with someone who came to me, and they were lamenting the fact that they were having a difficult time entering into relationships. And this was a conflict for this person because while they desired to have relationships, they had a problem making a commitment and entering into them. But what became clear through the course of the conversation and what came to light is that the reason this person had such a difficult time entering into relationships is because when we enter into a relationship, we give that person power. When people know stuff about us, they have power to either use it to build us up, or they can use it in a manner to tear us down. And so, entering into a relationship means to give that person power. And so, it's very important to understand before we enter into the relationship what it is that we're bargaining for and what are we getting. What am I giving and what am I getting? And I think that while many people know about Jesus, not everybody who knows about him knows him. And he's telling us this morning that it's important to know him. If you listen closely, there was a word that was used over and over and over again: remain. But there's another word that I would prefer to use than the word remain. And it's the word abide. He says, abide in me as I abide in you. I looked the word up because I wanted to make sure I understood specifically the context of how it's being used. It means to dwell within, to live within. Jesus is inviting all of us to dwell within him, to live within him. And he is asking us to allow him to live within and dwell within us. And he said that if there is a reciprocal relationship, that relationship will bear much fruit. I want to share with you what we're getting in this relationship. St. Paul does a very nice job in spelling out very clearly in his letter to the Ephesians in chapter 1 a litany of promises from God the Father that we receive in this relationship with Jesus Christ. He begins by telling us that we are blessed in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavens. My brothers and sisters, it's one thing to get a blessing, but it's quite another thing to get every single blessing there is in the heavens. And that is what we're being given in our relationship with Jesus Christ. Every spiritual blessing in the heavens is ours. That's what we're being given. And Paul says that we are chosen by Christ, by the Father, to be holy. To be chosen is something special. And you know it's special when you've experienced having been left out. You know, when I was a kid, we had pickup baseball games. And the older boys were the captains, they always threw the bat. Remember throwing the bat? And then you'd kind of one up, and the first one who got to the top of the bat was the first one to choose. And so then they chose teams. I'll take you, I'll take you, I'll take you, I'll take you. I never got chosen because I wasn't very good at baseball. So I got left out. So I know what it feels like to get left out. So knowing that feeling of what it means to be left out also gives you that feeling of understanding what it means to be chosen. I want you. I'll take you. I want you. Every single one of us has been chosen, specifically and particularly. We've been chosen by God. And Paul tells us that we were chosen for a very specific purpose, because we're destined for something. And what it is that we're destined for is adoption. And you know, when I baptize babies and the kids come with their parents, I always ask the kids what the difference is between being born into a family or being adopted into the family. And they always say, nothing. If you're in a family, you're a part of a family. And they're right. So God has chosen us to be a part of his family. And because we've been chosen, Paul says, this has been given to us by favor. It's a favor. It's God's favor that he says, I want you. That he specifically looks at us and says, I want you. And by this favor, Paul says that we are redeemed and forgiven in the blood of Christ, which he lavished upon us. Now, I looked up the word lavished because I wanted to make sure what that means and how it's used. And the dictionary says that it means to be poured out in great amounts. In other words, the blood of Christ was poured out on the cross in great amounts for you, and you, and you, and you, and her, and you. This was done specifically and particularly. And Paul says that this is a mystery. And the way that he uses the word mystery, he means it to understand and to be that it is an unknowable truth except when revealed by God. The mystery of God is an unknowable truth except when revealed by God, and it has been revealed by God in the person of his Son, Jesus Christ. And Paul says that God is pleased to reveal it, because that God's plan is to reconcile all things and all people by the suffering of his cross. And listen to this. That when God chose you, he looked at you and said, I want you. And he did it with insight and with wisdom and with intention and purpose. St. Paul uses those words. That when God chose us in Christ, he chose us with insight, wisdom, intention, and purpose. There was no luck involved. God looked at you and said, I want you. And Paul says that through our baptism, our nature and our existence is changed forever. Changed forever. And the reason that God has done this, because he wants to demonstrate his generosity and his love so that we might have salvation. So through our belief in the name and in the person of his Son, Jesus Christ, remember this is important. For our belief in the name and in the person of his Son, Jesus Christ, that is the truth of our salvation. The believing in the name and believing in the person is one and the same. And because we believe in the name and in the person of Jesus Christ, that is our salvation. And Paul says that because it is the truth of our salvation, we have come to know this through the proclamation of the gospel. And that when we were baptized, we were sealed. Now, the way they use this word sealed is very significant. The dictionary says to be sealed means to have an embossed mark, an impression as a sign and as evidence of something that happened. And I remember when I was in the seminary, the first story I ever heard about this sealing came from a professor who said to us, thousands of years ago, when a man presented himself and wanted to be a Roman soldier, they put a mark on him. They branded his skin. They put the mark of the emperor on him. So whether he had military garb on or civilian clothing on, no matter where that man went, when someone saw that mark, they said, he's a Roman soldier. And so when we're sealed, we are sealed with the image of the Son upon our soul, which can never, ever, ever be taken away. So when God the Father looks at us, he says, you belong to me. He sees the image of his Son because we've been baptized into his sonship. And Paul tells us that this sealing is the evidence of something that has taken place. We are consecrated to God. And that this sealing is the first installment of Jesus' promise, who was our hope and our resurrection. And that through this sealing we're given something. And what we're given is the Spirit of wisdom. And what this Spirit of wisdom has done is give us a knowledge of what is true and what is right. I'm going to say it again. That the Spirit of wisdom that we're given in this sealing is a knowledge, is an understanding of what is true and what is right. I don't think I'd have many people debate with me this morning in this church that there is a huge gap that stands between many people with regard to opinion of what is true and what is right. There's a lot of debate about that today. People are in conflict with one another about this very issue, about what is true and about what is right. And so this Spirit of wisdom results in our knowledge of Jesus Christ. And the only way that I can explain what I mean by that is to say this. I know Jared because he's a parishioner and because he's a friend But I know Jared in a different way than his wife Melanie knows him. That could be good, could be bad. I will never know Jared the way Melanie knows him. And that's the kind of knowledge, that's the kind of knowing that St. Paul is talking about, that we're given in this spirit of wisdom, of what it means to know Jesus Christ, to know the truth, to know the good, and to know what's right. And through this spirit of wisdom, Paul says, the eyes of our hearts are opened, and it assures us of hope. Oh my gosh, is this world in need of hope? People need hope. People need to know they're loved. People need to know that everything is going to be okay. And that's what the spirit of wisdom does. Now, there's something else that St. Paul doesn't say that I'll share with you. Maybe you realize it, and maybe you don't. But these very words, this gospel that was proclaimed this morning about abiding in Jesus and Jesus abiding us, you know where those words were spoken? At the Last Supper. So there is a connection, my brothers and sisters, between what we do on this altar, which is the fruit of the vine, and how well we abide in Jesus, and how much we allow him to abide in us. The necessity of gathering together and celebrating Holy Eucharist is not just a good idea. Jesus is saying it is a necessity that we gather together and that we feed on him. Because by feeding on him, we abide in him and he abides in us. Because apart from him, we can do nothing. Let's say it again. Apart from him, we can do nothing. And if we become convinced of that, and we know where to come and what to do, so that we have hope, so that we know what is true and what is right, then we will never say, do I have to come to church on Sunday? The question would always be, why would I ever want to stay away? Because now I know what God is offering me in this relationship. I understand what Christ is offering me when he opened his arms on the cross. Because he is our hope. He is our resurrection. And so when Robert and Dan stood up there this morning, they stood up there in the hope of the promises that St. Paul spoke about in his letter to the Ephesians this morning. And what we renew every single time we come to Mass and we celebrate Holy Eucharist. Abide. Abide in me, that I might abide in you. Because apart from me, you can do